Well, welcome to another episode of That's My Dad, Tyler Hewitt, here in the studio with us. Welcome, Tyler. Glad to have you, man.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
This is a special interview for me. I think we've done several now, but the ones I get to do with the guys that I grew up with and that grew up with me are really special. And my mind goes back, Tyler, to when you were about 13 or 14 and you and I were riding bikes.
Yeah.
We had some great bike trips, didn't we?
Yeah.
We would go ride 100 miles at a time, and 3 or 4 of us, and just built some great relationships and some great memories. Do you remember the night we got stuck on the trail in the dark?
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
We came in and you guys had a wreck in the dark on an abandoned trail out in the Chief Ladiga trail it was. But we had a good time, but our history is that you came to Eagle Rock when you were how old?
I was around 14. Right around 14 to 15. Yep.
Yeah, and you had quite a. By the way, for those who don't know, Eagle Rock is a boys' ranch that I founded and was there, and Tyler was one of my guys, and I'm really proud of where he is. We're going to get to that in a minute, but there was a lot that went on in those 14 years, first 14 years of your life, and I think that you have a story that a lot of young guys can relate to. Maybe a lot of them are going through now. And I wanted to get you to tell that story, as much of it as you feel comfortable. Some of it we may leave out, but just kind of tell us the story of your life, because and y'all listen, this is going to be interesting.
All right. So a lot of the true story I didn't really find out until towards the end of the story I'm going to tell, but I'll start from the beginning. I guess I was born in California, in the San Diego area, and so my biological mother and my father, they kind of just, I guess they just had me, and then they weren't a couple, so they would swap back and forth, keeping me, and I would stay with my biological mom, her sister, and her, and then with my father, when I stayed with them, I would stay with all his family, his mom and his sister, and I had a big family on his side, and so eventually some things went down between my mother and father, and one day my mom just skipped town with me, and she left and ended up moving to Texas, and she actually moved with a guy. He became my stepfather, and so that was, I think I was around, the storyline was probably around 2 years old whenever that happened. I ended up in Texas, and on my father's end, he didn't have a clue where I was. He just knew. He went to pick me up one day, and her sister said, "Hey, she's not here." She moved to Texas. Well, the way the story went was apparently she had become pen pals with this guy, and they were writing letters back and forth. So I ended up down there, and just she was involved in a lot of drugs, and so was he, my stepdad. So later on, when I was about 4, my first sister, she was born, and a couple months after that, they ended up both going to prison. So they ended up in prison for drug-related issues. So they were in prison, and then we didn't have anywhere to go. So where we ended up going was with my stepdad's family. And so that would actually be, no relation to me, it would just be my sister's, aunt and uncle and grandmother, where, my biological mom never told, them about my dad, and I never knew anything about him either. So all I knew is growing up was that my dad skipped town on me, and that was it. So that's just all I ever knew about my dad. I didn't know anything about him. Well, so we ended up living with these people, and they just weren't they just weren't the best people, you know. They had kids of their own. And so whenever you're the people that we were living with, you know, sometimes when that happens, they'll accept you in, you know, as their own kids. And a lot of kids get lucky like that, and a lot of them don't. And so we weren't really accepted in, you know, we were just kind of burdens, you know, so we just didn't get treated the same way as them. You know, we getting, you know, abused and just a lot of mistreatment there and stuff like that. So we kind of I went through that for years and years. And eventually we ended up staying with my sister's aunt and uncle for, I'll say probably third grade. I ended up staying with them full time. And so second to third grade, around that time. And one of the main things I took from that was, from that age, the father, he would have been my father figure at the time, because that's all I knew of as a dad, you know. So he wasn't a good father figure, but he was a really hard worker. And so he really instilled that in me, that, you know, what hard work is and that you have to work. And so that later on helped me as a man, you know, realize like, hey, we have to get out here. If you want something, you have to work for it. You can't expect anything to just come to you. So one of the things we would do, and he had a son who was about 2 years younger than me. So every Saturday and Sunday we'd wake up and we'd go and cut grass. He had a lawn care business, and I started doing that when I was, I believe, 7 or 8. You know, you just start out pushing a push mower back and forth while he's weed eating or doing whatever he did. And then, you know, you level up to a weed eater and you start doing that. And anyways, I did that for the whole time I was with them, you know. So one of the things that me and you've talked about was every morning we'd stop at the store close to the house and we'd get a drink. We get back then, they had those little 12-ounce Mountain Dew bottles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I would get one drink a day. And so I would drink on that all day. And I remember cherishing that one little soda I had all day.
Because he wasn't going to give you anything else.
Because he wasn't going to get anything else. No. So, you know, you sit there, and I was young, so I would take the cap off and pour a little Mountain Dew in the cap and just sip on it.
Yeah.
Just being a kid, you know. And so that's one of the things I really remember from doing that. But just a lot of work, and it really helped you in the beginning of being a man, you know, growing up, realizing once you turned old enough that you had to work, that it's not that hard to work, as long as you started when you were young like that. And so anyways, we did that every weekend, and I had really bad ADHD. So as a kid, it was really hard for me to have a good, you know, be able to handle myself like a normal kid, because I had such bad ADHD. And I think, you know, now it's more normal for parents to realize, you know, how to treat that with their kids, where back then I feel like what I went through was kind of just like I stayed in trouble, you know, like that's just the way you are, and you're just going to always be in trouble. So I was always, you know, always in trouble, just a lot of abuse and mistreatment because of that, you know. And so
you basically got locked in a house and left. Yeah. I remember you telling me you had to crawl out the window to just get some fresh air.
Yeah. That was back. That story was actually back with before I ended up with the my sister's aunt and uncle. My biological mother and stepdad, they were on drugs at the time. So my sister, she was still a little baby then. And we would just get locked in the room, you know. I would just get locked in the room, and I didn't know what drugs was until I grew up and realized, oh, that's what happened, And we stayed with my aunt. She had moved to Texas, I guess. That's how she ended up down there. And so my two cousins, they were really close in age. They would come over to the window. They would start knocking on the window, and they would holler at me like, Tyler, Tyler. So, I'm probably around 3 or 4 at the time. This is one of the main memories I remember from being that little, And I'll go to the window, and they would try to get me to jump. And now, jumping out of a window, it's not very high, It's just 2.5, maybe 3 feet high. But when you're 4, that's a big jump. And I remember that was so far down. I was so scared. But I was, 4 years old, and you're just careless. So, I just hopped out of the window, and we just go play in the yard. Of course, I would get in trouble every time. But
they were locking you in the room.
Yeah, locking me in a room.
For hours at a time.
Yeah.
Even days.
Yeah, we would just be stuck in there. And, the drugs they were doing, they didn't, they knew what they were doing, but they were more worried about getting high and things like that than the safety of their own children, So whenever they finally would wake up or whatever and find me, I felt that, and so especially the father, he was my stepfather. He was really abusive, especially towards, my mother and things like that. He wasn't afraid to put his hands on you. So we went through a lot of that until, like I said, they went to prison. And so fast forward back to with my sister's aunt and uncle, they ended up wanting to move to Alabama. And so the process of doing that, now that I'm older, I realize what happened. But they ended up, I guess, whenever you go to government housing, you have to go on a waiting list. So I guess they were on this waiting list. Well, it was towards the end of my kindergarten year, and we ended up moving to Alabama, but we stayed at a campground for the whole summer, and we lived in a tent out there. We ended up moving into the projects in Fairview, Alabama, and that's where I lived from first grade all the way to about 9th grade. Not specifically in the projects. I don't remember when we moved, but we ended up moving into a trailer park. And so we lived in that trailer park for a while. And it was just a lot of, like I said, going back and forth, dealing with me having ADHD, and I think them not knowing how to handle that, So for them, it was just whoopings and more whoopings and grounding. So I spent 90% of my childhood standing in a corner, and I might be 10 years old, and we were living in the trailer park at that time, and I would run away, and go hide in the bushes. They would come out, and they would find me, and I would get in trouble, get a whooping, and then just go back through it again and again. And so eventually I ended up getting into we were jumping on the trampoline with I was jumping on the trampoline with their son, and I was around 13 and he was probably 11, And whenever you're younger and you're boys, you're always play fighting always turns into an actual fight.
Yeah.
And so that's when it ended up happening. We started getting into actual fight. And so just as a kid, and they ended up calling the cops on me. So I ended up they pressed charges on me. The people I lived with since I was, 4 years old. So they pressed charges on me. Ended up going to the detention center in Coleman, Alabama. And so I was in there for, I think it was 3 or 4 days. But the time that I was in there, I liked being in there more than I did being with those people, And so I stayed with them for Now I would get out, and then I would, after that I end up going on probation. So they would tell my probation officer, hey, he's doing this or that. They'll put me back in there. So I'll go back and forth, and I spent a couple weeks in there on the summer. That summer, I remember, and eventually, the system ended up sending me to boot camp, and the name of the boot camp was Camp Mitnick, and I was there for 6 weeks. I get out from there, and I started going back to school. I think I was in 9th grade at the time. I'd actually started my high school year in that boot camp, and then I got out and actually started going back to high school out there at Fairview in 9th grade. And I got in trouble again with them for something, I can't remember what it was. There was so much stuff, but I ended up going into a behavior center that 9th grade year. By this time, I'm already 14. So I believe I was 14. Mm-hmm. And I had a social worker. And I remember I went in there that 9th grade year, and I remember spending my Christmas in there. And Thanksgiving, I spent Thanksgiving and Christmas in there. I can't remember when exactly it was, but my social worker, she was like looking for somewhere for me to go. Basically, she had talked to those people, the people I was living with, the parents, and they didn't want me back, They didn't want anything to do with me anymore. So, that really strikes you out there, 10 years of your life you spent with these people. And that just kind of shows how much they cared about you, So they said, we don't want them anymore. So they ended up looking everywhere, my social worker, and that's whenever they found the ranch.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to the ranch earlier that year. I can't remember what exact year it was, but
it was about 2011 or 12.
Yeah,
I remember,
I think
something
it was
like that.
I think it was 11. Yeah, 2011. Yeah. And so I stayed at the ranch for 2011. I think I got out of the ranch around 2014. 15 maybe, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And so I stayed at the ranch. And so when I first came to the ranch, the boys' ranch, Eagle Rock, and a lot of boys there hated that place. They didn't want to be there. They didn't want anything to do with it, But for me, there was structure, which you have to have that as a child. But coming from what I came from, I was loving it,
Mm-hmm.
I was loving that place. You had like freedom, to go and, work, make your own money. Even at that age, we were doing work, making money. You could buy your own stuff. You had your own room, you had a roommate, or some guys had their own room, and you had a lot more freedom, which a lot of those kids, they didn't have that. That wasn't freedom to them. But for me, coming from what I had, that was amazing to me, I loved it there. And, I ended up going to one of the high schools, and it was one of the bigger schools. So they I don't know, coming from where I went to school, where it was a smaller classroom.
It was tough. It was a big school where you had to go.
The school I went to was 2 or 3 times bigger, So I didn't really have that one-on-one, So I knew I wasn't really failing out of school, but I just didn't have any desire to go. So I talked to the lady that was running the ranch, and I kind of told her, like, hey, can I just get my GED? And she was like, oh, I don't know about that, back and forth. You need to go to school. And I'm not learning anything, And at the time, that's whenever they had just bumped the GED up, where it was supposed to be really, really hard to get your GED, to try to keep kids from wanting to, drop out and get their GED. And so I talked to my social worker, went back and forth with her, and finally they agreed, as soon as you drop, you withdraw from school, that you'll have to do this, you'll have to get your GED. So I did that. I got out of that high school, and that next week they send you to this y'all sent me to this program.
Yeah.
I think I was only there for maybe like 2 weeks. And they're like, okay, he's ready, to get his GED. And they're like, you're moving on pretty fast, whatever. So I went and took the test, and passed the test. Everything was good. And by this time I was in 10th grade, and I had already had my GED. So
yeah, a lot of the guys took them months and months and years even to get that.
Yeah.
You just got out and took it. And
yeah, I kind of just got out and took that test, like a week or two, and I got that under my belt. And I remember the day I got it. It was I think I actually got it on my birthday, because you're the one that gave it to me.
Yeah,
it came to your office or something like that.
Yeah, I've still got it.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah,
yeah.
I've got the certificate. I've got a bunch of certificates of guys that got their GEDs, because that's a proud moment for me, having seen what you guys went through.
Yeah,
and for you to make that accomplishment it's hard. You guys had it tough.
Yeah,
to work your way, the GED is no laughing matter. It's tough, but you worked hard, and apparently you learned some stuff in spite of all the things you had to go through.
Yeah.
So I remember you getting that.
I would have been 16 at the time. So now the next step was for me, to go ahead and start college. And so I'd always been really good at math and, working on things. I like to take things apart, put them back together. So I ended up going for robotic engineering. I think I went for about a year, maybe semester, about a year. And the same thing, I just didn't like being in a classroom, And I ended up getting a job at the company I'm working at now. And I remember I started out there, making $10 an hour, working 50, 60 hours a week. And like I said, everything kind of clicks for me. And I think that's where ADHD helps me, and my childhood working, from starting out 7, 8 years old all the way until I ended up, leaving that family. I was working even after school. I'd have to get out and work, whatever he needed us to do. So that helped me a lot. And I just worked my way up at that company, and now I've been a supervisor out there for probably a little over 4 years, going on 5 years. So I moved up pretty quickly out there, and now my next step is to go, back to school. That's what I'm starting on, is going back to school and getting that degree to move farther up.
What's the key to advancing career-wise in terms of attitudes and things you do?
For me, I would say a lot of times, especially whenever you're working for another company, is just they're going to offer you extra work, overtime, or move here. Do you want to move here? My main thing was to learn as much as I could to make myself more valuable to the company. And that's what I do, is just anytime I have an opportunity to learn, especially if you're getting paid for it, do that. Learn whatever you can, and don't have the mindset of that's not my job, that's his job, or, well, I'm pretty tired, I think I'll just go home. I already worked my 8 hours, I worked a bunch of 14, 16-hour shifts, growing up, to learn as much as I could. And that's really going to push you ahead, because working for a company, they see you wanting to make that extra money, and they're seeing that guy, he wants to learn, he's learning. And that's really what's going to get you ahead of the other guys, being eager to learn. And like I said, just taking advantage of any opportunity you can get ahead of the next guy, you know?
Yeah. And so you're living proof that works. Do you know at what point in your life, was there ever a point that you said, I'm going to do better? Or did it just kind of evolve?
Really what set it up for me to realize I need to go that extra mile is whenever my daughter was born. It still wasn't, I still didn't have that mentality whenever, her mother was pregnant. It was really once I held her in my arms, I was like, okay, this is it. I have to give her everything that I didn't have.
So she was a turning point.
That was the turning point where, okay, this isn't about just me anymore. This is about her. And so the last thing I ever want her to go through is anything that I had to go through,
So what do you say to the young guy who is where you were 10 years ago?
I would say to take advantage of any opportunity that you can, to if you have that opportunity to go to school, or if you have the opportunity to learn from anyone, I would learn as much as I can and use that to set yourself up, really.
You're always trying to improve yourself, and there's no reason that you can't. Man, we have guys that came out of the ranch and all their stories were kind of like yours. They all had challenges and disadvantages, but man, the things they're doing with their life, it's incredible, isn't it? Those guys, they're great dads. They have great jobs.
Yep.
Things are so much better for their kids than it was for them, just like with you. And I see pictures on Facebook of Zay and the things you do. What do you think it takes to be a great dad?
I think for me, I think for me, what helps me to be a great dad is to, I know a lot, especially as a dad, you kind of want to stay that manly man, especially having a daughter. I would say just throw your dignity to the side, and get down on her level with her, If she's 2 or 3 years old, or my daughter's 6 now, I'm going to, whenever it's time to play with her, I'm going to act 6,
Yeah, you were out playing with water balloons at the birthday party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So get down to her level, because that's where she's going to relate with you the most, is when you're treating her like a kid,
Mm-hmm.
And then whenever it's time to be stern, especially in things you believe in that you want to instill in her, be stern about those things.
What do you want her to say about you or think about you?
That I love her. I loved her. I showed her how much I loved her whole life, and that I was always there for her, and that I made sure she knew what was right and what was wrong,
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. There's a kind of a footnote to your story that I think is kind of neat. Several years after you got out on your own, you get a phone call one day.
Yeah. So it was 7 years. It'll have been in April the 14th of 2016. Actually, I was actually at work where I'm working at now, and I had a meeting to go to, and this lady had messaged me on Facebook. And so I get this message, and it was from this random lady, and she said, can you please call me? This is my phone number. And I was like, who is this, And I messaged her back, oh, no, I don't know who you are, Especially, there's a lot of scams, obviously, on Facebook. Mm-hmm. So she was really adamant. She was like, please call me. I'll pay for your call. Anything, just call me. And so finally I messaged her back. I said, okay, I'll call you. So, I ended up calling her. I said, let's see who this is. And she answers the phone, and she says, are you Tyler Hewitt? And I was like, yes, ma'am. And she's like, Tyler Bruce Hewitt? That's my middle name. And I was like, yes, ma'am. And then she she asked me what my birthday was. Well, she said, "Is my birthday?" And I said, "Yes," kind of starting to get aggravated, like, what's going on, And then she started crying, and I was like, "Hello," and she's like, I found you, and she was tore up. And I said, who are you, and she said, "I'm your dad's wife, your biological dad's wife." And I was like, "Jerry?" Because I had just seen his name on my birth certificate. And I was like, "Jerry?" And she was like, "Yes, Jerry." And I said his last name, and she was like, "Yes." And I said his middle name, and she's like, "Yes, that's him." And I was like, "No way." She's like, "Yes, I'm serious." And so I'm crying at this point, and she's like, "Your dad loves you. He never stopped loving you. He's been looking for you all these years." I don't know if a lot of people know, but whenever you're young, the way the system works is it shouldn't be easy for people to find you. You don't need to be able to find a kid. And so it was really hard for them to find me, but she never gave up looking for me, and I heard her stories calling all of these other Tyler Hewitts, and girlfriends getting mad. Who is that? Who? Why do you keep calling my man? And all of those, why are you calling me? Stories. And finally she found me in, Gadsden, Alabama. And that next day we were on an airplane. I was on an airplane up there to go see her, to go see my father and meet her. And they have my step sister, and met them, and it was amazing. I met my father, and my dad. He's great. He's successful. He has his own company out there. He has a really big construction company out there, and he's just, I talk to him all the time, and I go out there every now and then and spend time with them, and I see all my family that's out there, and
So it's a great story, and
it had a really
warms my heart every time I hear it.
Yeah.
So Tyler, you're an inspiration to me. It's one of the joys of my life to know that I dedicated my life to helping guys like you, and you've made it, and you're still making it. I mean, every day, one day at a time. But you're an inspiration to me, and I want to thank you for that. You're also an inspiration to a little girl, and you're her world. And so we had her do just a short little video clip for you. We want you to see that.
What do you want to thank your daddy for?
A drone.
You want to thank him for a drone? Okay. What is your favorite memory of you and your dad?
We went to a very fun water park, and it was so fun. I loved it, and we went to that little park where it's so fun.
All right. And what makes your daddy so special?
Everything, and it makes me so special. It makes him so special because I love him so much.
All right. And what's something you want to say to your daddy in this video?
I love you so much, Daddy. You are the best daddy ever. You are the best.
Is it worth it, Tyler?
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
All the working long hours.
Oh, yeah.
All the stuff that you do to be a great dad. Is it worth it?
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Well, you're an inspiration again. So thanks again for coming in. I know it's hard to go back and tell your story, and sometimes people just want to leave it behind and go, and I get that. I understand it, but you've made the sacrifice to share your story so that you can help other people, and then we're going to help you to do that. So thanks again.
Thank you.
That'll conclude this episode of That's My Dad, where we're inspiring fathers to be great dads, and we're breaking cycles of generational fatherlessness. See you next week.